Rule the day the plant-based way with the new vegan mixed berry from Smoothie King. Powered by whole, non-GMO fruits, oat milk, and vegan protein, it's a dairy-free, plant-based smoothie you can feel great about. With 13 grams of protein and half your daily fiber, it's an easy way to get the essential nutrients your body craves. Skip the line and order online for pickup or delivery. Smoothie King. Rule the day.
Hi everybody, this is the Cricket Badger podcast.
Each badger marks the track with its own scent.
His black legs are short but very powerful for digging. The name badger probably comes from the French word bêcher, meaning digger.
Hello everybody and welcome along. And it's rather special, this one today. 200 editions of the Cricket Badger podcast in the back pocket, and 3 terrific guests as well to take us through the 2 parts of the 200th edition of the Cricket Badger pod. But if you'll indulge me for just a second, I just want to say a few thank yous before we get into the meat and 2 veg of the 200th edition. When I first started out doing the Cricket Badger podcast, throwing on a bit of audio and having a chat and a natter with a few people, the 200th edition was, it wasn't even a distant dream. I don't think I knew exactly where the Cricket Badger podcast was going to go, but it's kept me sane during the year 2020. We've gradually increased the listenership. The standard of guests has been absolutely fantastic throughout, to be honest, not just recently, but throughout. Thank you to everybody who's given up their time to come on to the Cricket Badger podcast. Thank you to the sponsors as well that we've had along the way. It's all about the guests and it's all about what they've got to say, and it's been brilliant listening to the people I've had on the podcast. And it's also fantastic to know that everybody cares about the sport. You know, everybody that comes on is so passionate about what they talk about. Number one and listened to in countries that I've never even been to, and that is remarkable to me, and I really appreciate all of you out there for listening, whether you've been with the Cricket Badger podcast from the start or whether you've just caught up with it. Then thank you for tuning in. Your listens are much appreciated. The volume of traffic in terms of communication and responses and tweets, etc. on the @cricket_badger Twitter feed has gone bonkers as well. It is fantastic that it reaches appreciative ears. And one final thing as well, if I could dedicate this 200th edition to my dad. I know he listens. And big encouragement to the Badger. Often have a chat with my dad and he talks about the guest that I had on the week before, and he generally says that he enjoyed it. He has been telling me recently as well that on the 2-parters I should put in these kind of intros and outros so people know where they are. He has constructive criticism as well, but he's a fantastic dad and I love him very much, and this edition is dedicated to Michael Buttler. But let's get on with the show, because we have 3 terrific guests to celebrate the 200th edition of the Cricket Badger podcast. 3 very good blokes, actually. Cricket is filled behind the scenes with very good people, and here are 3 examples of some of the finest. I'll introduce them in just a second, but trust me, this is a very, very good edition. The 200 is up, and I thank you very, very much indeed for being part of the Cricket Badger podcast.
It's that Badger style.
Got 3 very special guests alongside me today on the Cricket Badger podcast. I will start in clockwise order on my Zoom screen in front of me. The first one is the Guardian's Ali Martin. Ali, how are you?
I'm not too bad, thanks, Mr. Badger. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. And I had a very nice time with you in Abu Dhabi one year, and I remember extending your credit card limit, I think, on a whiskey that you bought me right at the end of the evening. Have you recovered from that financially yet?
Yeah, I was quite newly employed at the Guardian, and that was quite a bold expense claim to put in there first up. But anyway, I've survived. I'm still here.
Good stuff. And next one is George Dobell, ESPN Criicinfo. George, you've basically stopped me from drowning in Barbados. We've told that story before on the Cricket Badger podcast, but how are you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there have been some regrets. But I'm really well, thank you. How about you?
I'm good, thank you very much. And thank you both so far for joining me. And it would not be a landmark edition of the Cricket Badger podcast without, as he's appearing on my screen, Catherine, but Daniel Norcross. How the devil are you, sir?
I'm unusually well, thank you. I've decided to rewatch the entirety of the reimagined Battlestar Galactica, and I'm already up to episode 11 in series 3. I've forgotten how absolutely batshit crazy it all is.
Well, there you go.
Imagine answering that. That be the answer to how are you?
Exactly.
Getting Battlestar Galactica into that. Imagine doctor's appointments with the Norcrosses. Anyway.
This is just the start, I think, George. I'm afraid this is just the start. Let's get into the questions, because the cricket badgers out there have not let me down. They've sent in plenty of questions for us to get our teeth into over the course of this episode. And we'll start off with one. I mean, the first few are quite COVID related, which is not a surprise in this current age. And Rumal Rahman has sent in a question. This year's events have arguably ushered in a watershed moment for the game. To varying degrees, well, I mean, basically everybody has been affected, says Rumal. In what state will the game be in a year's time, given that many tours are likely to be cancelled? Let's start with you, Ali.
Blimey, it's a massive question to start off with first, isn't it? There's a sort of utopian vision of the game that emerges from this, where everything becomes more equitable, and that the big countries look out for the small countries, and that the finances are more evenly distributed, and that help is given to get cricket back on. But if we're going to be in fast, we'll probably see that self-interest rules, and that is, slightly worrying for the game. We're already seeing tours being cancelled, postponed. We've seen England, in terms of their men's schedule at least, get the entire summer on, which was no mean feat. And I think, it was one hell of an achievement. And also to get, a series against West Indies for the women as well was a decent effort, given two countries have pulled out. But then you contrast that to, say, Australia, where they've just cancelled an ODI series with New Zealand. There's a test one-off test against Afghanistan has been put back. There are clearly going to be some big decisions made, and the logistical difficulties of getting cricket on. As I say, I'm leaning towards. I'm hoping that a fairer, more even game emerges from it. But I do worry when you look at the track record of the big three.
George, it's been a fantastic effort from the ECB and everybody concerned this summer to get, as Ali says, the full quota of men's games played this summer. But it's a worrying time for the game, isn't it? Where are we going to be in 12 months' time?
I don't know where we're going to be, but you would like the game to have some leadership here, both moral and financial. And the ICC can't even agree who leads them. So I don't think there's a huge amount of room for optimism right there. I think it's really concerning that things like that Afghanistan game was cancelled. I think it's concerning that India decided not to send their women's team to England. We know that English cricket owes a debt to West Indies, Pakistan, all the teams who came, to be fair. And I hope that is remembered. As Ali said, there needs to be a more equitable distribution of finances. It's not actually just a moral thing, it's a practical thing. If you don't have these countries to play in a few years, what will happen to the game? So I hope that there is some vision and some long-sighted planning, but as I say, they can't even agree who is meant to lead them. So there's not a huge amount of room for optimism, I don't think.
Dan, you're a fairly optimistic soul. Are you optimistic about the next 12 months of cricket? I mean, COVID's very hard to predict, isn't it, as we all know, but where are we going to be in a year's time?
Well, I'm capable of being optimistic and pessimistic at one and the same time. There's a very interesting article written at the start of COVID in The Guardian, which is about attitudes to all things generally. Those people on the left see COVID as hastening the realisation that government needs to get more involved and centralised. Finances need to be used to prop up the market, which is obviously going to fail during something like COVID. And right-wingers think, well, this absolutely proves the exact opposite. Now, I don't know where we're going to go. I'd say that I think we're going to make a distinction between international cricket and franchise cricket. So international cricket will take a hit in terms of revenues. So then it has to ask itself, if it's going to survive, is it going to distribute the revenues that it has got more equitably? And now it will be the moment to do it, because it has to, because there'll be some countries that are completely wiped out by this. Franchise cricket, on the other hand, may thrive in this environment. That might not please everybody. So you might see the IPL making more than ever out of it, because there'll be this vacuum created by a lack of international cricket. I thought it was very disappointing that the Women's World Cup in New Zealand didn't take place, in the one part of the world where there's virtually no cases. There could have been a way to organise that. So that wasn't a good sign. But one of the other things I think we've got to take into account, I don't know what all you think about it, is that sport more generally had been seeing spiralling wage costs and an enormous amount of not phony money, but speculative money, speculative investments on broadcast deals coming in all sorts of sports, most notably in football. It starts to become obscene when you see in football that a club can go to the wall for the want of £500,000 and Gareth Bale can be paid £600,000 a week. Now, those kind of inequalities are going to become more visible under COVID because more people are going to be suffering. So I think sport more generally may see a restructuring of its wages and actually the number of administrators it has. We're already seeing that with the ECB, aren't we? With talk of redundancies, no one wants to see those redundancies, but by the same token, they did become a slightly more bloated organisation. George can give us exact figures, but in the last 15 years, the number of people working within the ECB has increased quite drastically. So I think we might see cutbacks there. We might see streamlining in those areas, which might actually be quite welcome.
I'll come back to you with the next question, Dan, because you lead us into county cricket there, into English domestic cricket. Ted's asked, and Ken's asked a very similar question. Can English county cricket survive COVID-19? The 18 counties is, I think, sacrosanct almost in English domestic cricket. I'd hate to see any of the 18 counties go to the wall. But Ken follows that up with, if you had a magic wand to save county cricket, how would you save it? You've got carte blanche to do anything you like. What would you introduce to save county cricket? Start with the first one. Are you concerned about the 18 counties and the English domestic structure?
You should always be concerned about it, but we must remember that they've got quite a lot of power to vote in the ECB board, and as long as we protect that, then their interests. The money that the ECB makes is distributed in part towards the counties, but some counties are thriving because they've got bigger grounds and conference facilities and can make more money, and other ones that are smaller don't. I want to see 18 counties continue because I don't quite see that there's anything wrong with that. I don't quite see that making it smaller. Everyone points to Australia and says we have 6 first-class states. That makes all the difference. Totally different situation. India's got dozens of first-class. Every country develops in its own different way, and England's developed in this way, and I'd like to see it remain in this way because, again, as George and Ali have both pointed out, the 2 teams that contested the Bob Willis Trophy final, you wouldn't think of as big clubs. You might think they were the ones who were in danger. And yet, you look at them, they're the best 2 counties in the country and have been for the last 4 or 5 years, notwithstanding Surrey's epic win in the county championship in 2018. They produce players for England. It's a system that has worked increasingly. It took England to number 1 in the world in Test cricket not that long ago. They're world champions. They're up there at the top of the T20 rankings. It doesn't seem to me that it's failing English cricket. Obviously, the amount of money that the ECB is going to have lost through COVID is going to be an issue to keep those counties surviving, which is why I think we might see restructuring and wages being different and that kind of thing. So, I mean, that's how I'll answer the first part. Maybe we get the others to answer that first part. I'll then ruminate on the second part.
Okay. Ali, I mean, 18 counties. I mean, what Dan just said there, sometimes when England aren't doing very well internationally, we look at Australia and we think, well, we need to have the Australian model. But equally, Australia do the same thing when they're not doing so well, don't they? They look at our model and say, well, their first-class cricket is as strong as anywhere in the world. Can all of the 18 counties actually make it through this COVID-19 period?
I think so. And also, I think we've got a new ECB chairman who's just come in, and Ian Watmore, and he's pretty much pledged that in his first interaction with the media. So I'm hoping that we can hold him to that. I do think that if you look at the landscape from where we were and where we are, I mean, this should be the end of the first season of the brand new TV rights deal. The money has jumped significantly in that time. Now, if you look back to how the game was operating a year ago on the finances then, all right, we were now lost out on this new bumper deal, which is worth 1.1 billion over 5 years. Clearly, that figure will come down over the 5 years because they're going to be trying to make up for the losses of this year, which at the moment stand at 100 million. But the fact is, the game should still have more money coming into it than it did do previously. And and in that time, we've had 18 counties thriving. I think George always makes the point in his pieces that when he writes about this, it's about 18 centres of excellence. And I just think it's something that English cricket can't afford not to have because geographically, I mean, obviously the game's moving towards 100, and I'm sure we'll come on to that side of it, but 18 centres of excellence, and that is helping to produce, depending on the structure that we have of the English game, whether it's 2 divisions or conferences looking ahead. But to date, certainly since the turn of the century, it's been producing a pretty damn good England team, I think. I mean, if you look across across the formats. Sustained success across all three formats is tricky. And it's going to be cyclical, and it's going to come and go in waves in terms of the players coming through. But ultimately, looking back on the last 20 years, in some ways we've never had it so good. And looking at that and looking at the way that the money, albeit having been reduced from where we thought it was going to be, it should still be moving in the right direction, I think.
Moonrise is a sports engagement website to allow sports fans to learn from the very best. Get a personal video message recorded for a fan's special occasion. Have a professional cricketer as your next coach by getting video feedback or having a 30-minute conversation with some of the world's best players. Players such as Jimmy Neesham, Colin Munro, Tammy Beaumont, Danny Wyatt, Monty Panesar. Visit moonrisesports.com or go to Moonrise Sports on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Moonrise Cricket, let's play. George, as Ali mentioned there, I know you're a big advocate of the 18-county structure. The tentacles that those 18 counties give us throughout the whole of England aren't to be underestimated, are they? Is it going to be possible for all 18, though, to get through this one? Because the financial situation is quite severe, isn't it?
I sort of am a big advocate of the 18, but I always caveat that by saying they have to sing for their supper. And if there were 25 that were doing a good job of spreading their tentacles through society, then let's have 25. Equally, if a couple of them are failing, and I don't really mean failing in lots of different definitions, but then I would be open-minded about their future over the longer term. So I'm not, 18 seems a slightly arbitrary number. It's developed for a reason, but things always change. I mean, it's only not that long since I was 17. I'm actually sort of open-minded about the number. Are they spreading their tentacles effectively? It's an interesting expression. I mean, looking at the lack of representation of non-white people, they're probably not, are they? Looking at the somewhat sluggish development of the women's game, which obviously done very well in the last few years, but it's taken until recently. Are they doing enough? I'm not entirely sure that they are. So I think they can survive. But I hope that, in every catastrophe that there is some opportunity, and actually they realise that they have to engage better with all parts of society, not just the sort of middle-class public school educated parts of society who can afford Sky subscriptions. And they realise for that, because it seems to be self-preservation is the motivation so often, I hope they realise that they have to represent the community which they're meant to serve far, far better. And unless they do that, James, I'm not going to. I feel like I don't defend them gratuitously. I'll say again, I think they have to sing for their supper. And while I am disposed to defend them all the time, there's a couple right now that I struggle logically to defend.
Name names, George.
Well, the Glamorgan model hasn't really worked, and I'd love to see cricket thrive in Wales, and I wonder if there's a different way of doing that. So, for example, I would be very interested in exploring, at least at this stage, the idea of Wales going it alone as an ICC nation, guaranteeing them T20 games against England every year, maybe having a 4 or 5 nations competition in the bank holiday weekend, maybe guaranteeing them a T20 against the touring sides each year. I would personally be happy to look at funding Wales in the same way that Glamorgan are for another 10 years and sort of taper it and get to the stage where they can go independent. I don't think the current model's worked. I think we've given it a while. And, I hate to say it, but you've got to look at Derbyshire as well. And I say that with a heavy heart, but if it's not working, something has to happen, something has to change at some stage. And I would have said that before COVID, what you don't want to do is make decisions based on the last couple of years' results. So personally, I find it quite easy to defend Leicestershire, even though their results in the last few years of the Championship have been dire. They have produced players. Derbyshire, that is harder to argue. Had a decent season this season, of course, so that's encouraging. And I would do everything possible to sort of help them make that county work, but we should be honest and not just say, this is the point I want to make, James. I just don't want to say, it's got to be 18, it's got to be 18. If there were, as I say again, if there were 25 that could do it and do it well, that would be great. But right now, I think everything has to be looked at with fresh eyes. And it's never bad to be self-critical and honest. And I hope that doesn't sound too harsh on them, because it's not meant to be. I want to see cricket in Wales work, I really do. And I'd like to find a way that we could do that better than we are at the moment.
Last time you came on the Cricket Badger podcast, George, there was a couple of comments after your podcast to say he should be in charge of the ECB. Well, I'm giving you the chance. I'm giving you that magic wand now. How are you going to save county cricket? Which way are you waving that wand? What are you going to do?
There's all sorts of things. But I do think that home counties, home nation, Six Nations, some sort of competition like that would be really beneficial. I actually don't think there's a huge amount wrong with the sport that a bit of free-to-air coverage wouldn't help, or a lot more free-to-air coverage wouldn't help. I think that on one level, I would just say we need to change the language that we talk about it. When people talk about handouts to the county game, they need to be corrected. It's simply wrong. I quite like the model in some ways as it is. It's sort of this odd socialist model that cricket has, isn't it? But in terms of other practical stuff, I wouldn't play white ball cricket in a window. I think that's a big, big mistake. You're always going to be sacrificing something else when you do that. I also don't think it's great for the customer. I would get supporters much more involved, because I think their views are overlooked and they're taken for granted. And I actually think there's a lot of wisdom out there among supporters and spectators. I wouldn't play the 100, and I would get the balance better between free-to-air and income. I don't think Sky are the enemy at all. I think they do absolutely fantastic service. But the problem is that our game... Look, The Simpsons had this great line. Marge Simpson goes into the snooty shopping centre, and the sign over the door is, our prices discriminate because we can't. That is basically the problem with cricket in England. I'm not sure that a lot of the issues we're talking about in terms of race at the moment are based in sort of racial prejudice. I think there's clearly a bit of that, or there's clearly quite a lot of that. But I actually think there's a sort of class and finance issue that goes deeper. And that, the problem we have is we have a great bloody game at the moment. We've got a brilliant team, but it's only great and accessible to those who could afford to watch it.
But we had Ravi Bopara on a rival broadcast of Sky during the Bob Willis Trophy final on the BBC. And I was asking him quite at great length about inclusivity and about how he'd felt throughout his career. And in actual fact, what came across quite loud and clear from Ravi was that he'd had a pretty positive experience of being a British Asian coming through the ranks in Essex. And his experience is not wholly positive, but that was the message I was getting. But he wanted to make a strong point about how white working class people were also struggling to get into the game. It wasn't just British Asians or British black people that were struggling. So I do think that we've got a cultural problem with cricket that I've seen at club level. I think it's become a bit monocultural. And it's, without wishing to disparage golf clubs, it's that sort of stereotype of the golf club and who runs it and the Rotary Club and that kind of thing. And cricket's a sport. To get people to play it, get people to enjoy it, they've got to have fun. They've got to be able to express themselves. So people from a variety of different backgrounds and classes need to be able to come along on the pitch, and as long as they're not cheating or being abusive, express themselves playing cricket, not be sort of looked down on because they've over-appealed or, they're a bit rough around the edges. We've got to make it a welcoming place for people to come. And one of those areas has been women for a long time, did not feel very welcome in cricket. Now we're finding ways of actually bringing women into the game. And if we can recognise the value of that, we can surely recognise the value of bringing, as George is alluding to, non-white middle-class people in. This isn't a matter of being woke. This is a matter of saving your game and getting as much participation as possible and as much money in it as possible. It's not even a moral imperative. It's whatever a moral imperative looks like in sport. It's an imperative for the game to grow and thrive. And to do that, I think we've got to stop being quite so status driven. We've got to be a lot more welcoming to everybody that comes in, and we've got to give them the opportunity to be themselves in the game.
Down on that, do you think there's two issues there, though, that you bring up? You bring up the inclusivity of the game in terms of access to the game, and that could be anybody. And then there's the racism issue. I mean, we'll jump ahead to another question, which was from Greg. Is racism a genuine problem in cricket, or are there more pressing concerns?
Racism is a genuine problem in society.
Yeah.
How could it not be a problem in cricket if it's a problem in society? I mean, look, it's been going on forever. It's sometimes been worse, and sometimes we've made strides. The civil rights movement was really quite important, as I recall. The abolition of slavery was quite helpful. But you're not going to tell me that there isn't a race problem around the world, and it manifests itself in all sorts of different ways. There are brown people who are racist towards black people, and black people are racist towards other black people. We should be dealing with our race problem. To pretend it's not there, or to say, oh well, we've talked about it, do we need to keep going on about it, is absolutely ludicrous. There's a vast number of people from British, Asian backgrounds, and let's not put them all into one category, because Sri Lankans and Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, Sri Lankans, Indians are all very, very different people with very, very different cultures. That's why I mentioned culture and being welcoming. A Sri Lankan can be brought up with a very different cricketing culture from a Bangladeshi. And once we've got the idea that we welcome everybody to play the game, then that sort of chips away at the racism. Now, look, the wider societal problem racism has is that it is access through wealth and the ability to have access. And cricket can't solve all of society's problems there by making inner city black kids, by providing them with on-the-spot facilities that are quite expensive. We can't just do that out of nowhere. The wider society has to take all these things more seriously, but they are doing, aren't they? I mean, Black Lives Matter, whether you agree with the movement itself or not, is bringing these things again to the fore, and we're having a bit of a moment. And Sky, for me, we had the greatest rain break known to history on the first day of the first test, when Emily Rain from Brent and Michael Holding talked brilliantly. And I hope it was educative for people to understand, put themselves in the shoes of black people, to understand how they feel. All I'm asking is that we do think along these lines rather than being defensive. It's incredible how people get defensive because they think that if we say there's a race problem in cricket, they think that you're being accused of being a racist. We're not accusing anybody of being a racist, anybody individually or particularly. But we are saying that unless you, as Michael Holding said to me over a drink in Manchester, he said he wanted me to recognise him as a black fast bowler, right? A black man. He didn't want me to recognise him as a fast bowler. He wanted me to know that he was black, so that I could therefore have a greater understanding of his experience. In exactly the same way that I would, I like to know if somebody was from a Yorkshire mining village, because they'll have different cultural references from me. It's only polite, isn't it, to bear that in mind, rather than to run away from the issue, scared that we're all going to be tarred with the racism brush.
For all you foodies out there, I'm unwrapping a McDonald's steak, egg, and cheese bagel. Ooh, look at this steak. And the juice running down the side. Got a little bit on the wrapper here. And then the fluffy egg and real cheese folded over the side, looking just so good. Grilled onions and a butter bagel too. Thumbs up for McDonald's steak, egg, and cheese bagel for breakfast. Love it. I participate in McDonald's.
When I had Michael Carberry on the podcast just after the George Floyd murder in America, we talked about that, and because there's a phrase, isn't there, about not seeing colour, and people see that as a badge of honour. And I talked to Carvers about that, and he said, "Well, I am black, you're white. That's what makes we are different, but we have common ground, and that you converse with people on that basis, don't you?" Ali, one thing that really annoys me in the coverage that I've done on the podcast, and that obviously has been elsewhere with the BLM stuff and everything else, is that people have a very short attention span for stuff like this. It's kind of people are placards and marching in the street one week, and then I don't know, Piers Morgan says something about vegan sausage rolls the next week, and everything then goes on to that, and we forget about the racism side of stuff. It's something that we need to be talking about on a regular basis, don't we? If we're going to solve it and if we're going to make any difference, we've got to carry on talking about it.
I think so. I think that's probably where Michael Holding's disappointment that the players didn't continue taking a knee before games throughout the summer, and which is understandable because he's right, because the world does move on. People do start talking about other things, and actually, if you were to have that as a constant reminder, it would sort of keep the debate alive, because new people coming in would see it. What's all this about? It leads to questions, lead to answers, lead to greater understanding. It's interesting about English cricket, I find, that if you go back to the team that won the World Cup last year, and I had a couple of beers after the final, was obviously quite pleased with the result and having seen an amazing game and what have you. But I was chatting to one of the guys from the Indian press pack, and he was sort of saying, what does this mean? And I said, on a personal level, I find it interesting because the makeup of that England team was pretty much the makeup of my road, which is ridiculous. But we have an annual street party every year, and I would say that in terms of the actual sort of proportions of where people are from on my road, there's it's mainly sort of white British, but we have South Africans, we have people from Ireland, there is the Caribbean, there's a couple of Caribbean families, we have families who their heritage from the subcontinent, for example. And it actually felt like a team that really did genuinely represent where I live. And I was kind of, I actually, as I say, I don't know what it is, so I was a bit, feeling a bit euphoric about this and quite good about where English cricket had got to. But it would be a mistake to look at that England team and the way it's come through and just to say, well, that's proof that there isn't a problem here, because clearly the numbers aren't borne out across the county game. We're talking men's cricket here, but aren't borne out across the county game in terms of recreational cricket and how that translates into the county game. The numbers shrink in terms of the representation from different communities. So clearly more needs to be done. Just going back to the question about the magic wand and what you do to sort of help English cricket. As much as I'm talking about things here that need to be done and how we need to address these things and we need to keep having the conversation, as you said, one of the things about cricket I would like to wave the magic wand, and it's just to give the sport a massive dose of confidence. I feel like so many of the sport's sort of shortcomings are born out of a lack of confidence. In fact, the 100, which again we'll keep going back to this, but it feels to me like a competition born out of a lack of confidence in the existing product. And the existing product isn't perfect, but my God, the actual sport on the field is brilliant, isn't it? I mean, we're four sort of white middle-aged guys sitting here talking about it, and maybe that's kind of reflective of our experience of it today. But I think there is so much good in the sport, and the sport occasionally just needs to puff its chest out and really have that confidence to say, this is a sport for everyone, and it's a great sport for everyone, and this is why. And I sometimes feel like, especially when we're talking about the 100, I've heard the ECB say that this will appeal to British Asian audience, and I'm thinking, why? That's quite presumptive. It's a little bit patronising, and also you've only got to look at the World Cup and the ticket sales there to see that there is clearly a clamour to get there. And also, I worry that because the English county game isn't perfect yet on that front, then actually by creating something separate to it, you're almost giving it a free pass to carry on as it was. And I actually think, the county game, for all of the goodness that it brings, it shouldn't be let off the hook on that front. And actually, by creating the 100, I worry that you just, that's the tournament for the new audience. That's the thing that's going to bring in other guys. I don't think that's how it should work, personally.
Dan, you've got your hand up.
Say that I think it's symptomatic, Ali, isn't it? This lack of confidence is symptomatic of the game knowing that it has got something wrong, which is that it isn't inclusive enough, and that it isn't bringing enough people in, because that's exactly that. Those are the stated reasons for them doing things, which is why I'm actually a little bit more positive about the 100. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm as positive about the tournament itself, but the reasons for it strike me as coming from the right place, which is that the game needs to attract a wider cross-section of society. It looks at football and it thinks, well, no wonder football's confident because everybody loves it. Why can't we get everybody else loving it? Now, you might argue that they're going about it the wrong way, but at least it's driven by the right motive, isn't it?
It's fair to say it's well-intentioned, but I just worry that it's a sort of marketing rebrand, and also it's kind of, as I say, you're creating something separate as opposed to, I would personally rather that they went deeper into the 18 county structure and rebranded it, refreshed it, and opened it up, because geographically it covers more of the country, let's be honest.
Ravi Bapara said to me something that talks to exactly this point. I asked him what was the moment he was most proud of, because he's coming towards the end of his career. Was it playing for England? Was it this, that, and the other? What was the highlight of his career? He said it was winning the T20 Blast last year for Essex. Now, I probed a bit deeper on that, and he did say openly that he thought that if he was in the 100 franchise, there was no way he was ever going to feel as brilliant about winning the 100 as he felt winning the T20 for Essex, which tells you something about the affection with which the players hold the counties that they play for, and I'm sure that is mirrored in the fans.
We'll come back to the 100 in just a second, but I want to get to George on the issue of the racism stuff. And George, we've talked quite a bit about this, and I noticed a comment you made last night about you wish you'd maybe written a bit more about it previously to the BLM movement and everything that's come out this summer. I think in terms of the England team that Ali referred to in terms of the World Cup, obviously a couple of the guys were imported from Barbados, but Adil Rashid, Moeen Ali, etc. When I've spoken to the BAME community over this summer, they've said to me that you have two challenges as a black person in English cricket. You have the challenge that all cricketers have, that you have to be good enough at cricket, and then you have to overcome the colour of your skin. And in a way, the fact that Adil Rashid and Moeen Ali were good enough to be in that squad, it kind of explains why they got into county cricket and went beyond that. A lot of people don't get that far, and cricket needs to look at itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does for sure. I don't know where to start, really. I've been quite shocked by what I feel stupid saying it. If I'm honest, if you'd asked me a few years ago in, say, 2013 or so, I would have told you ridiculously that I thought we were on the way to becoming a sort of post-racist country. You know, I'd watched the 2012 Olympics and all the rest of it, and I feel embarrassed to admit that now. And there are a couple of things that have changed since then, and one of them I think is probably Brexit, which I absolutely accept that non-racist people could vote for Brexit with very good intentions. I completely accept that. But also, I think people who do feel that way might accept that it did stir up quite a lot of hatred from people who don't have good intentions and goodwill in their heart. So I think the country may have changed a bit, and I found this summer quite shocking. And I'll give you two or three examples. I mean, firstly, when I was doing the piece I did with former black players, and one of them, my friend, the academic Richard Sargent, said to me, he interrupted me and he said, no, that you're the problem. This is it. You middle-class white boys, you talk to your other middle-class white boys, like Norkie, you're not racist. You presume that no one else is. And your complacency makes you complicit. And the moment he said it, I was sitting where I am now. I thought, well, that's not going in the piece. And then I realised that actually that was the piece.
Yeah. And
you know what? Those words they have wobbled around in my head all summer, and quite disturbed me. And I fear he may have had a point. At the same time, you know, what can I say? I now have a non-white family. I have a black granddaughter. Maybe that has, I mean, it shouldn't have done, but maybe that's changed.
You still there, George?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
To be honest, I find it quite upsetting. So, I was sitting with Munir Ali yesterday morning, having a cup of tea, and Munir Ali is Moeen's dad, and I was having a cup of tea with him yesterday morning, and he was talking about the problems one of his family was facing, and asking for a bit of advice, and I had a sudden flashback to 15 years ago when we were sitting in a very similar cafe, having basically the same conversation about Moeen and the reasons that he had to move from Warwickshire to Worcestershire. And actually what's happened is his Moeen's nephew has now done the same thing because he felt that opportunity was blocked. And here we are 15 years later, and we've not made any bloody progress at all. And, you know, here I am, I'm sitting in Birmingham, in Edgbaston, just by a club full of people I know and like and respect. And there's not one white player or one white coach on the Warwickshire staff in a city the size of Birmingham filled with Asian people who love cricket. That is a catastrophic failure. And what I'm really tired of is middle-class white fellas in these clubs telling me everything's all right, telling me things are a lot better, telling me the pipeline's full of young Asian talent. Well, we're not seeing any bloody change, and the way we've been doing it hasn't worked. So Michael Holding has become much more vocal because, and I'm talking to Michael a lot, because he's bloody angry. And I think we should all be bloody angry.
People notice a healthy smile, but maybe you have tooth sensitivity, bleeding gums, or acid-weakened enamel. Sensodyne, Parodontax, and Pronamel are trusted specialty toothpastes created to help improve your oral health. For tooth sensitivity, choose Sensodyne. Bleeding gums, get Parodontax. For acid-weakened enamel, Pronamel is the toothpaste for you. Sensodyne, Parodontax, and Pronamel. Trusted specialty toothpastes to help bring home your healthy smile. Visit Ibotta to earn cash back.
Everybody Rain for Brent summed this up for me brilliantly, James. When George Floyd died, everybody was really rocked by that. Really, really rocked. As was Mikey, I think. I got in touch with her in that classic white middle class way to offer support. But I also asked her a kind of quite a crass question. I said, I feel I don't know how to express my support. I don't want to virtue signal all over Twitter on an issue that I can't talk to with the same confidence. What should I be doing? And she said to me brilliantly, bluntly, and with love, she said, Daniel, I've got rather a lot on at the moment. I think you need to come to your own conclusions about what you need to do. But what I would say is that you have to decide whether you're not racist or whether you're anti-racist. And I found that quite challenging because a bit like George was saying, I hadn't asked myself that question before. I hadn't asked myself, how can I be actively helpful? I actually do something properly rather complacently sit back and think, well, I'm not the problem because I'm not the racist one. When in fact, I captained a team of 10 Pakistani kids and we got the Premier League and the Surrey Championship and we played these games, and game after game I'd get letters from opposing chairmen complaining about the way we played the game. And we didn't cheat. We didn't alter the state of the ball. We didn't do anything like that. But my team was very vocal and very enthusiastic and played the game in a certain way. And what was really being expressed was, I'm not going to say it was cancel culture, but it was like, you've come here and you've not played it in our way. And that was, it's not overt racism. It's not like, depriving people of a vote or a job or these kind of things. But it makes people feel less welcome. That's the experience of their lives playing against some of these people who play cricket. Now, that was 10 years ago, and I haven't played much club cricket recently, and my experience of my club, Surrey, is a bit different from George's at Warwickshire, which is that there's some terrific initiatives, including the ACE programme, which Ebony has set up. But just on subject of Mikey, I can tell you how changed he's been. He has shown me, and I spoke to him a lot when we were down at Old Trafford, he's shown me historic examples of cruelty and slavery, and he's engaging with the subject really head on right now. And it tells you something about how this has been hidden, that it's been hidden from him a bit as well, from his Jamaican background. And he's played in some pretty volatile places. He played in Australia in 1975-6, and the crowds weren't massively enlightened in those days. But he said to me, I just thought it was crazy. I'd never come across this stuff before. I'd go back to Jamaica. But, well, he doesn't think like that now, and he's confronting it head on. And I think we should be more than supportive. We should get right behind what it is he's doing, because he's educating us all.
And that's what it's about, isn't it? When I spoke to Michael Carberry, I'll be honest, it was after the George Floyd thing. Let's do a podcast on this, because it was the topic of the day, and that was the motive. And after speaking to Carbs, and then obviously talking to Azim Rafiq a few weeks ago as well, and being contacted by a lot of other people too who didn't want to go on record because it's, you're putting your head above the parapet and you become a target, don't you, if you do that. It makes you think about yourself and what you've done in the past and how you've been. And what drives me most mad about the current situation is that short attention span, is that defensiveness on social media, where if you raise an issue, George's piece yesterday about the Essex Cricket Club and the lad that had some alcohol poured over his head, I retweeted that and made a comment about that and lost followers straight away, because people just see it and they think, oh, why are we still talking about this? Well, we got to talk about this. And if your first reaction is defensiveness, you need to ask yourself why. Why are you being defensive about it? Your first reaction should be, let's make a difference. Let's make this better.
I don't know why people can't see an opportunity here. And it's mirrored a bit by the women's cricket situation, and it still happens in women's cricket. But when 4 or 5 years ago, whenever you mentioned women's cricket, it was, why are we doing this? Why are we going on about this? Well, I'll tell you why, because the more people that play cricket, the more money comes into cricket clubs, the more people can participate in it, the better the facilities are, the better the players will be, the better the spectacle will be. I don't give a rat's arse the colour or indeed gender of the people who represent England. If we've got the best 11 players out, as an England fan, I'm going to enjoy it that much more. And I'm staggered that everybody doesn't feel like that. We could see this as an opportunity. Instead of, beating ourselves up with birch twigs, we've got an actual, not once in a lifetime opportunity, because I fear it'll be someone else's opportunity in 10 years because of the way we always push it under the carpet. But we should see this as an opportunity, a terrific opportunity to widen the reach of our sport, to make it really, really thrive. And that would be a great thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you been wanting to lose weight and get healthy? Now's the perfect time to start Nutrisystem. Enjoy your favorite foods made healthier, delivered free to your door. Right now, you can get Uniquely Yours Ultimate, our most complete foolproof plan at an amazing price. Order today and save 50%, plus get an extra $40 off. Go to Nutrisystem.com/save and discover what millions of people already know. Nutrisystem works. Limitations apply. See website for full offer details.
Ali, let's move on to the 100, because we've mentioned that a few times so far. As you probably all know, I oppose the 100. My views have changed a little bit, to be honest, since I set that up because of the current climate, etc. But there's been a load of questions on this. Surrey Ultra says, are the ECB morally or ethically right to go ahead with a new format after laying off staff and begging the government for financial handouts? Simon Hancock says, forgetting the moral or ethical issues for now, is it a good idea financially? I thought the 100 was to lose money in the first 5 years, and that was based on ticket sale estimates. And that surely has to be revisited, obviously, with COVID and potentially no fans coming into the ground. Martin Hadland says something very similar about, is the 100 the right thing to do in 2021? Things have changed, haven't they? Ever since that, the 100 was first muted as being the one to seek this new audience and to take the game into new fields of exploration and get a new crowd in. The landscape has changed. Should the ECB stick to their plan?
To be honest, I mean, I tend to deal in what is happening rather than what should happen most of the time. And I've kind of kept my powder dry on the 100 quite a bit, just to watch how it unfolds and, and try and report it in a sort of neutral way and try and keep an open mind for it. The problem is that the more I've thought about it, the harder it's become to sort of see the good side of it. There are so many workarounds that they've had to come up with to get to this point. And I just think that's, if something needs that many tiny, I'm talking, there might be 50 of them. They might only be small things. For example, why the hell are Welsh Fire women going to be playing at Taunton? When they all stack up together, you just sort of think, hang on, why are we doing this? Like, you have, and as we mentioned again earlier, in terms of what Ravi was saying about what it meant to win the T20 Blast for Essex, we have 18 sort of, proper heritage brands there, if you want to use that horrible marketing word. But you've got 18 historical things. I mean, they probably need freshening up. I would probably argue for 2-division T20 with all the focus on the top division, maybe even separate the players away from the first class contract so that you have possibly a transfer market or a trade market. I was struggling to see the need for it beforehand, and then now when you look at the finances and the way the game's going, as you say, people being laid off, I'm really struggling with it. The fact is they are pressing ahead though. There's absolutely no mood music from the ECB at all that this is not going to happen. In fact, even without crowds, just to say that we should be making the best of it, I don't know, but it's quite clear it's going to happen, and perhaps that's the mentality we need to have, because it will be cricket. I've seen some of the trial games. It is going to be cricket in some shape or form. I don't get the way that it's a gateway drug to the wider sport, given that you'll have to recalibrate your brain from 10 ball overs or 5 ball, 10 ball overs into 6. There's again, that's another little workaround that just doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't. It's not quite a boiled down cricket game that can open up to other people. I'm struggling to see it. That's it. I think I'm really struggling to see it. I'm yet to be convinced. We've been talking about this for a good few years now, and having looked at it for so long, the fact that I haven't had this sort of dancing moment that I've seen. Oh right, I get it. I find a bit troubling.
I think what Ali was saying before was something that Vic Marks has certainly been big on, and I thought was obvious, which is a two-divisional T20 structure, with the first division being televised in its entirety. And indeed, with the massive bulk of the TV rights going to the teams that are in that first division, but on a one-year basis, hypothecated solely towards the wages of those players. So a county isn't going to get excessively rich over its competitors on the back of success in the T20, but it will be able to buy the players that the 100 are currently buying. And you have promotion and relegation. You get a really exciting promotion game off the back of the second division game. I mean, you can make that 1 plays 2, or you can have 1 goes up and 2 plays 3, and the bottom 2 go down. Don't care. You would then tap into the existing structure that already exists. You tap into the existing footballing culture that exists, which is promotion and relegation. I think it's going to be really hard to develop those brands, these new brands. I don't think, as Ravi said, that the players are particularly bought into them. I know it did work in the IPL, or it is working now, but that's taken quite a while, isn't it, to develop those brands, and it comes off the back of an entirely different first-class structure that India have. So I think they've been comparing apples with chairs, not even with pears, because they're not even the same fruit, or fruits. They're entirely different things. I don't think it's a moral issue. I don't want to go down the line of consequentialism would suggest that if they make a load of money out of it and it suddenly revives English cricket, then it's morally right. I don't know if it's a moral issue particularly. I think it's a financial issue. George and Ali quiz the finances of the ECB and the counties far more closely than I do, and they're better able to say what the projections are for 100. But in light of COVID, it seems that it adds an extra layer of risk that you wouldn't particularly want to put in at a time when things are risky enough as it is. So if it happens, I will watch it with glee and enthusiasm, because I watch all cricket with glee and enthusiasm, and I'm sure we will watch good cricket, as Ali alluded to. In terms of the structure for English cricket, seems to me to be unnecessary for all the reasons I've said.
Just to come back down on the Ravi Bopara thing, the allegiance that you have for your county, because that's your county, whereas your franchise team isn't yours. In India, the first-class structure, I mean, it's the first time really the Indians had something razzmatazzy to latch on to, didn't they? We've had the T20 Blast, we've had 18 counties for God knows how long, apart from Durham. So the IPL is different, isn't it, to English cricket?
It's entirely different. So is the Big Bash. These are totally different things you're comparing with. I understand why they thought of this, and I don't think that they can be excoriated for having the idea, because there's a precedent for something similar. But I just say again, part of it is the counties wanting a different competition, so they're partly to blame. George will talk about that as well. It's not just some suit in the ECB. There's a whole load of reasons why we've ended here, but it just seems obvious, doesn't it? You restructure the T20 Blast, which was doing really rather well, and you give it more razzmatazz by having a first division which you televise all of and has loads more money in it and can afford to buy the best overseas players. I don't know why it was made so complicated. I suspect I do know why, but I don't like the reason. Yeah. Sorry, George.
To be fair, that is what the chief executives voted for. They voted for a remodelled T20 Blast with promotion and relegation, and they were overruled.
It's that Badger style.
Oh, that's the end of the first part of this 200th edition. So effectively, the second part is 201 or 202, depending on when the IPL Daily Pod comes out. But I think you'll agree, having George, Ali and Dan on for the 200th edition was a good move on the Badgers' part. Very entertaining chat so far, and it doesn't get any worse. If you turn over, that's a little bit recordy, isn't it? That's probably a little bit old school. If you press stop now, stop me yattering, and stick on part 2. I think you'll enjoy that as well.
Rule the day the plant-based way with the new vegan mixed berry from Smoothie King. Powered by whole, non-GMO fruits, oat milk, and vegan protein, it's a dairy-free, plant-based smoothie you can feel great about. With 13 grams of protein and half your daily fiber, it's an easy way to get the essential nutrients your body craves. Skip the line and order online for pickup or delivery. Smoothie King. Rule the day.